Beyond the Snap podcast. Here on this episode, we're actually going to be covering the week zero reaction. So, just on Saturday, just a day ago, we saw a couple of games happen. We had Stanford, Hawaii, and most importantly, we had the Ireland game, which featured Iowa State and Kansas State, which came down to the wire, which came down to three in a good old classic kickoff game. And so, yeah, we're going to break those games down for you as well as introduce our BFER 2025 poll as of right now. So, we just edited it for week zero. We won't show you all the preseason one, but we're just going to start it on straight week zero before we get into kickoff of this Saturday, where we see the big games, where we see Ohio State, Texas, um, all these big hitter games, TCU, UNC, LSU, Clemson. But before we get into those games, we'll have those on a later episode, so stay tuned. But what do we have this week, Kieran?
Yeah, so we're going to play a fun game, and that game is called Guess the Outcome of the Game from the Stats, where I'm going to give Kirtan some fun stats from yesterday's Farmageddon game, and even though he already knows, he's going to give us a reasonable guess as to the outcome. So, if I told you Becht had a 50% completion rate and only passed for 183 yards, on top of that, Ohio State rushed for a mere 2.8 yards per carry. Avery Johnson, however, went 21 for 30 for 273 and two touchdowns. But who would you say won the game if I just gave you those three stats?
Based strictly off those stats, I would say Kansas State won 24-14.
Right, that would be the conclusion of any logical person. But then these few things get added on, and that's how you end up with the outcome you got. K-State lost Dylan Edwards off of an injury right as the game started, pretty much. They give up 48 yards of penalties, which those two things alone, you might say they could still scrape by. If Avery Johnson passed that well, they had such a good passing attack that they were able to compensate for the loss of Dylan Edwards. But on fourth down, Iowa State converted all three fourth downs that they attempted. K-State converted 1 out of 4. That is the reason Iowa State won the game. So, at least from my side, I'm not sure how indicative this actually is of the prowess and the skill of both of these teams because we're not sure yet, but hopefully Kansas State will have all its personnel back the next week. Hopefully they'll have Dylan Edwards. Hopefully they'll be able to clean up the week one penalties and maybe make a bit smarter of a decision on fourth down. And it looks like that Avery Johnson is pretty much as promised because remember, this was a rainy game. There wasn't a whole lot of offensive production at all in the first quarter. So I think to be able to pass for 273 yards, given the conditions, indicates that he's probably going to be very good this season. And in terms of Kansas State, I don't think they're going to take a huge hit for their season. Obviously, you want to win this game because it boosts your strength of schedule and everything. But down the stretch, I think Kansas State can still be a very good team and really improve. So, again, credit goes to Iowa State. They were able to take advantage of those mistakes, cash in when they needed to, especially on two really key touchdown passes, and then put the game on ice. But for me personally, it doesn't say a whole lot about the quality of the team, especially it being a week one game. So, at least from that aspect, it's really important that we don't kind of overreact and don't panic and don't take this too far out of context and understand that it was a messy game. There were a lot of mistakes made, and ultimately we kind of have to take it with a grain of salt and understand that there are other factors that led to the outcome beyond just the skill of the teams involved.
Yeah, and what I'll say on the game was I don't know how much this really mattered. Again, so we saw this is year two where we've seen an upset. Last year it was Florida State being upset by Georgia Tech. And this year, of course, it was Iowa State upsetting Kansas State. But what I will say is it's one of those games where you're in week zero, you're just trying to make sure everybody knows what's going on. Of course, you've had scrimmages within your team, your white, your orange, you have your internal scrimmage, but now you finally get into a real game setting, and it really sets the tone for how your season's going to go. The loss of Dylan Edwards was crucial. I mean, honestly, it was one of the saddest sights to see, especially so early on in the game, because he's going to be such a key player for Kansas State going forward. And so hopefully he rehabilitates and he gets a speedy recovery. But besides that, we also don't know everything. This game was played in Ireland. The field was wet. It's a soccer field. It's not really a football field. So players were slipping a whole bunch. There was lots of fumbles. People weren't catching passes. I think they had over like 6, 7 drops in the game. I mean, there was a whole bunch of things. I even remember at halftime, the announcers and commentators were speaking about how the players should switch cleats. They need to switch to these soccer cleats that actually can pick up more of a grip than their football cleats are, because we're not seeing any movement and all these cuts are being rounded and it's actually favoring the defense. And even the coach spoke about this at halftime and after the game, saying the conditions weren't the best for both teams, but they were still outplayed nonetheless. I mean, Kieran told you about the fourth down stats. Kansas State went 0 for 4, I believe, on fourth downs, while Iowa State was able to go 3 for 3, or either way around. But regardless, I mean, that tells you something about the team. It's just telling you that Avery Johnson and the Kansas State offense cannot execute, especially now without Dylan Edwards being one of their star players, being in there to at least gain yards. And I don't even think both teams ran the ball that much because they weren't able to pick up yards. I remember Avery Johnson actually having to scramble a whole bunch during the game. So I feel like it was just a sloppy game of football. Honestly, I got tired of watching it after some points because there was just so many fumbles in the 1 yard line, all this random stuff. So I think we're going to see a much better brand of football going forward from both teams. It was just condition, maybe a little bit of jet lag, being overseas, all these different things probably played into effect to some degree. And I think that they're going to clean it up, especially going into week one when they're actually going to start their season on the proper scale. So as of right now, I would say that it shouldn't be a concern to either team. Good win for Iowa State. I don't want to discredit that at all because it's still a ranked win. But Kansas State, I don't think is as good of a team, especially at the beginning, as they will be at the end. And same goes for Iowa State. So,
All right, moving on. The other game that we're going to cover, because we don't have time to talk about Fresno State and Kansas. Yay, Kansas won. Good job, Kansas. Jalen Daniels is back. That's your coverage.
mhm.
Sorry, back is in he's back to playing well, not as in his back is hurt again. I just wanted to clarify that. Um, but moving on to the Rainbow Warriors beating Stanford. So for me, the big story here was that Hawaii was able to kick 3 field goals. Their kicker is Japanese, and he learned how to kick on YouTube. That is modern college football. Made a game-winning kick in, one of his first collegiate attempts. Made 3 field goals this game. Really solid, and he learned how to kick on YouTube, and he's from Japan. So, I'm very proud of Hawaii, and they've done very well. But, Stanford, don't get beat by a YouTube kicker, please. Um, but,
Yeah.
when in Rome, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, you're at Hawaii for this game, especially for Stanford. And I mean, it's kind of sad because I honestly thought Stanford would have a better year this year. But I mean, QB play was just not there. Ben Goldbranson, he threw for I think only 100 yards and an interception. I don't even think they had any passing touchdowns. Luckily, on the what do you call it, rushing wise, they did have 113 yards out of Mike Ford, which was nice. But then, honestly, I was really impressed by the quarterback of Hawaii. I mean, he stuck in, and Mike Alejado, he had 27 for 39, so low, bit over 50%, close to 60 around there. But he had 210 for 2 touchdowns and 0 interceptions. So he just had a great day overall. But again, I just think these are two teams that later on they're going to find their identity. I hope Stanford finds it fast because Stanford's going to be screwed if not, because they're going to be playing in this now packed ACC conference where they still have to go through teams like Miami, Florida, SMU. I believe they have no, they have Notre Dame, not Clemson anymore. But still, yeah, they got to get their stuff together and they got to find their groove fast because it's going to get bad sooner or later. So I think it's not really a telltale sign. I mean, we didn't predict either of these teams to go far in any aspect. No offense to either of them, but I hope Stanford can actually bounce back. I mean, a 3 point loss is brutal, but we'll see. At least a lot of these games were close this season, or a lot of these games were close this week. So hopefully that's a good thing for future games to come in the competition.
Yeah, and I just really think that ultimately for Stanford, right, their passing attack looks so hesitant. I can't tell you the amount of times you saw Branson kind of sit there, pat his feet, and wait and wait and wait, and then have to bail out and throw it away or waste of the play and things like that. So for Stanford, I think they really have to focus on either getting him to be more aggressive and be less. Maybe his receivers just aren't open, and maybe Hawaii's secondary is doing a fabulous job, right? That could be true, right? But you have to say that at some point there has to be some separation that the receivers are getting, and he has to be able to find that and fire the ball out before it's too late and he's being flushed from the pocket and the play is a scrub and you've wasted a down. So, try to work that more play action pass. Like I know Stanford talked about during the preseason, working more, run to pass, hammer it, and then throw the ball. So, in that respect, I really think that Stanford has to kind of mature and add that next level to really be able to play good football.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's what we're going to see future on. But as of right now, I think they're just going to have to find their footing because honestly, they've lost it as of right now. But, anyways, moving on to something way more fascinating than Stanford and Hawaii and Iowa State, Kansas State, we have the BFER Poll. So for those of y'all who are new to this channel or just started watching, me and Kieran do a Beyond Football Excellence rating poll. It's a power ranking of every single team every week. We show you who's climbing the poll, who's falling, and we like to base ours away from the AP poll, away from conference standings and games like that, to literally who do we think in a one-on-one game in the championship, who would beat who, and that's how we do our ranking. So I'll pull it up for y'all right now. But as you can see, instead of favoring like the AP poll did teams like Texas and Ohio State, we went more down the traditional QB route. So as y'all can probably see here, we have Penn State as number one. Now, the reason Penn State's number one in our week zero poll is because we're basing this off of turnover, is what at least I was thinking of it as. Now, Penn State and Clemson, they're both retaining a lot of players. They didn't lose a lot of people to the draft. Of course, Penn State did lose Abdul Carter, but besides from that, they still brought it. They still have all their key pieces surrounding them, including both their running backs and their quarterback Drew Aller. And Clemson's bringing in basically their entire roster is coming back for another year. They have a really strong offensive line. Their wide receiver core are very good, and of course, you have one of the Heisman favorites, Cade Klubnik, up there as number two. Kieran, is there anything else you would like to add on why we have our one and two separated from AP polls?
Yeah, so this is going to be different because we're, like Kirtan said, we're thinking about turnover, and really this is about proven commodities. What do we know about your team coming in that makes your team better than the teams ranked below you and worse than the teams ranked above you? And for me, Penn State and Clemson are one and two in proven players that we know will play well. They both have good coaching staffs that I think will allow them to have really good results this year. And that's why they're ranked there right now, right? If it turns out that Drew Aller is not improved or is worse than last year, obviously there's going to be a fall there. But if it turns out that Cade Klubnik is even better than we thought he was going to be, maybe they rise up to one, right? And we'll see that week one. It's just that for now, they're going to sit there because they have the most proven players and proven talent.
Yep, absolutely. And then looking at 3, 4, 5, 6, all the way through 10, you could say, we try to follow the order that I guess a lot of the experts are saying. So Texas, of course, is number one in the AP poll and the CBS poll. A lot of them have Texas number one, and that's, of course, due to the talent they have. They have Ryan Wingo, Khalil Lockett, Colin Simmons, Anthony Hill. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. And so Texas would be number three just based off sheer talent. And then Ohio State number four. Again, this is because of Jeremiah Smith, Julian Sayin, Caleb Downs, literally the whole nine. And so we're definitely going to see what happens between these two teams come week one. But we definitely think that they're in solid standing. Then following them is Georgia, Notre Dame, Alabama. Alabama, if y'all remember, I believe finished super low last year on our BFER poll. I think they were down at like 12 or 13, especially after the loss to USC in the bowl game. So there was a whole bunch of stuff going on with them. But Alabama, of course, I think they brought in a bunch of recruits. They're bringing in new quarterbacks. So they're moving off of the Jalen Milroe um, hiatus period where they had to have Kalen DeBoer coming for his first year. So now Kalen DeBoer, if I'm sounding like I'm rambling, Kalen DeBoer is now coming into his own. It's his second year as the coach. He's going to build up his foundation now, and he has a bunch of quarterbacks that he can do this with. Ty Simpson is his number one right now. Following him, he has Keelan Russell, who's the freshman from Duncanville. So he has a bunch of weapons that are still coming in, and he still has a top four recruiting class. Then, of course, I skipped over Notre Dame. Notre Dame has Jeremiah Love. They have a bunch of players. The reason why we have them at 6 and not higher is because we're taxing teams with new quarterbacks. Again, Texas dropped to number 3, Ohio State 4, Georgia 5. Georgia out of the top, it looks like top out of the top 7, Georgia, besides from 1 and 2, is the only one who has a quarterback that played a good amount of time last year. Everybody else has a fairly new quarterback. And then continuing on with 8, 9, 10, you have LSU, who has Garrett Nussmeier, who's the front runner for Heisman, or actually, I believe that odd has changed now to Arch Manning. But, anyways, a front runner for Heisman. You have Oregon, who, of course, is bringing in Dante Moore after he backed up Dylan Gabriel last year. He had a great time at UCLA, I believe. And so I think that he's just going to be a phenomenal talent. And then you have Miami, Florida, of course, who brought in Carson Beck for an ungodly amount of money. And they're, of course, looking to build on the success they had last year with Cam Ward. Then we have Florida and Arizona State. Florida is a bit of a we don't know where to put them. So in the AP poll, they're actually low. I believe they're like 14 or 15. And the reason for this is because we're expecting them to have a lot of losses, especially when they come to teams like Texas, Georgia, Ole Miss. I mean, they're going to get absolutely hounded whenever they play all these top tier talents. But as a team, they're very solid. They gave Georgia a run for their money last year at the world's largest outdoor cocktail party. They gave teams like Ole Miss a good run. DJ Lagway is actually going to be healthy, probably coming into later on in September and no in November. So there's some highlights with him. And then Arizona State, again, this is also building on the fact that they are bringing back Sam Levitt. Um, Basically their team is looking stronger as ever, and of course the hype around them is of course going to play some degree of factor, as we learned from Colorado 2 years ago. So I definitely think that they belong up here. Kieran, you have any objections or comments on their top 12?
No, I just say again, it's mostly based on returning talent and less maybe where we think you're going to finish. Because obviously, Florida has a much harder schedule than a team like Arizona State or even a team like Miami. And so it's really important to take that into consideration and understand that when you're developing this sort of ranking, especially in this kind of preseason era where we haven't seen a whole lot of teams play yet.
Yeah. And then going on through, let's say, the rest of the teams, I can just knock them out and then Kieran can give you his aspect on it. Michigan, of course, is bringing in Bryce Underwood, who is the number one recruit in the nation last year. He will be their starting quarterback going forward, and so we have good upside for him. And again, we do want to clarify this is not how we think they're going to finish. We don't have Texas above Georgia because of the fact that we think Texas is going to finish above Georgia in the SEC. We don't have Bama above LSU because of where they're going to finish. We just have it based off of tier talent. So even though Florida might have to play all these harder teams, I would still take Florida over South Carolina, even though South Carolina will probably finish above them in the actual SEC. But anyways, yeah, Michigan we have at 13. Following them, we have 14 with South Carolina and their quarterback, who is going to be Lenore Sellers is going to be, in my opinion, the Heisman winner. Following that, we have Illinois at 15, based off their success last year, and Luke Altmaier, returning quarterback. SMU, same story. SMU fell off a little bit because we don't know if they're going to be able to retain the same amount of respect and have the same approach that they did last year. We don't know if it's a fluke season, in my opinion, but again, Kevin Jennings is a returning quarterback. 17 A&M, you have Marcel Reed, you have the two running backs, you have a great defense. A&M honestly might be the sleeper. Having them 17 might be a little disrespectful because I think that they could hold their own against teams like Illinois and SMU and probably win. Oklahoma has their new quarterback coming in. Um, and so we don't know where Oklahoma's going to finish. Of course, last year it was a bit of a rocky ride, but we'll see how they perform this year. And honestly, if you look at the numbers for Vegas, you can see that the Red River Showdown is actually a lot closer than it was last year, especially number wise for the point spread. And then Iowa State, recent success, just beat Kansas State. We jumped them up to 19. Following that, Indiana, another team that made the playoffs. But can they really hold on to that success? We don't really know. Ole Miss, they lost Jackson Dart. They lost a bunch of key pieces, so they've fallen off a little bit. Texas Tech, a team that risen, like shot at the rankings. This could be due to the fact that they've brought in an ungodly amount of players during the transfer portal. They've been spending out of their mind, and that's because they are backed by one of Texas's biggest donors. So expect them to have big things happen this year, and so I actually have them above Tennessee for those reasons, and I think that they're going to be I think it might be a battle of Texas for the Big 12. I see it possibly playing out being Baylor versus Texas Tech, and maybe not even BYU. But of course, after that, we have Tennessee. Tennessee lost their quarterback, Nico Maliava, has moved to UCLA, so they're going to be starting a brand new guy. BYU, same boat, lost their quarterback due to different reasons, but still, he's out of there. And so they're at 24. And lastly, Kansas State bringing up the rear just after a loss in Ireland against just a really sloppy Iowa State. I mean, we don't want to punish them too hard. Again, week 0. So we'll see how week 1 plays out, and we'll see if they rise or fall, see if last game was a fluke. Kieran, is there anything else you'd like to add?
No, I just think again, I think A&M has a lot of potential to move up in this ranking. Illinois kind of trying to feel, taking some hints from the general media on that one. I am not super confident in Illinois in terms of when the big games come. So you may see them fall in the coming weeks.
But yeah, that's what we have so far for BFER Poll. Of course, we have a ranking out for everybody to edit. We actually have a poll, like an actual poll, where you can choose on your top 25. And of course, that will always be refreshed coming in after week 1. We'll bring it back, and then everybody can vote. And we can get your opinions and see if your opinions line up or oppose ours. And we'll add both polls simultaneously next to each other. We'll have our audience poll and our poll, and we'll see overall in the season who's doing better and who's making the uh, more correct decisions, you could say. So that's what we have so far for the BFER poll. But besides from that, I believe that we're actually going to keep this episode relatively short, a little under 30 minutes, actually really close to 20 minutes. And we're going to come back later on this week when we have a full deep dive on all of the games that are going to occur, especially on this upcoming Saturday. Of course, you got Texas, Ohio State kicking off at 11. You got LSU, Clemson. I know you got Old Dominion, Indiana, Tennessee, Syracuse. You got just a whole bunch of big hitters. I mean, Karen, what else do we have over this week?
Yeah, so there's a lot of really interesting week 1 games. None more than Tennessee and Syracuse, obviously.
Hmm?
But we will be back to preview it all, talk about it, go over, rehash, debate, and give you guys a good longer episode. This is just kind of a quick reactions episode. And obviously, since it's week 0, not a whole lot to talk about.
Yep.
But not nothing, notably. So, thank y'all for watching. We really appreciated it. And have a great rest of your day. Kirtan, do you have any final thoughts?
Nope. See y'all on later on this week, probably Friday. Peace.
Peace.